Well, yeehaw, everybody. Welcome back to Southern Oklahoma and Okies, Eden. I'm going to film the intro in here because it's very hot outside. Today, we're going to be talking about composting. So stick around for the excitement. Everybody does composting differently. There are some that use the barrels that you can rotate, some that have digital thermometers that check the temperature of their compost. Some throw it in a pile, some bury it, however you do it. No way is essentially wrong per se, in my opinion. I use nature as my guide. If you watch how nature grows, how nature decomposes, you can learn a lot. Just look around you. When you go in the woods, if you go into a pine forest, when you dig down, you'll find a black, nutrient-rich soil because year after year after year, when the pine needles drop and they decompose into the soil, they just keep adding to the health of that soil. That's the way I do it, and you're going to see that when we go outside. There are some that say, get it to this certain temperature, try to hold it at that temperature, rotate it, water it, do this, do that. Yes, I'm not saying any of that's wrong, but like I said, working on a farm since I was a kid, farmers don't have time to be babysitting compost temperatures and rotating and watering all that stuff. They have livestock, they have gardens, they have home repair, tractor repair, hay to bring in. There's so much stuff going on. That's why farmers simplify, okay? That's just how it is. So let's talk about that a little bit more. I use a couple forms, which I'm going to show here in a minute. One form is I have a compost bucket where I add dirt, compost, and I water it throughout the season. And that goes the entire summer. That is my starter compost for the following year. So when I plant new seeds or potted plants, I throw a little of my compost in the hole or the furrow or whatever to give it that burst of nutrients that it needs. But during the off season, I do my compost in a bigger fashion where I put down a lot of grass clippings and pumpkin vines and leaves and old bean plants. Anything that I pulled up from the garden, pepper plants, anything, they get tossed on the top of the garden and tilled in, and I'm going to show that. But then when I create a new section of garden, what I do also is each week when I add compost to my bucket, I always have stuff left over because I create a lot of compost because we eat a lot of vegetables and fruits, eggs, and so on and so forth. So I will strategically go around to different parts of my garden where I know I'm going to be growing certain things, and I'll dig a trench and I'll throw it in there, and then I'll cover it and wet it down. And that'll just sit there through the whole fall and winter, and in the spring when I rotate that up with the tiller, that becomes a very nutrient-rich soil. So I do it many different ways. Everybody, like I said, does it a little bit different. If you have watched my Dirt to Dessert playlist so far, you'll see where I planted my sugar pumpkins, and beneath those sugar pumpkin seeds, I dug a trench. I put pumpkin, the mush, the seeds, the shell, banana peels, egg shells, coffee grounds, and then I covered it, wet it down. Then I planted the seeds in a mound over it. So as those seeds from the pumpkins, when the roots from the pumpkins go down into the ground, they're going to be fed for that 120 days or whatever it takes by what's beneath it, and should produce a solid plant and so hopefully a great pumpkin harvest. And you're going to see that. So stick with me. We're going to go outside here in a minute, and I'll show you the 3 forms of composting I use And I hope you find this informative, so stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back to my compost segment. So when I talk about a couple different ways to compost, so here's one. This is just a bunch of grass clippings and some old bean plants that are now just thrown in a heap here. And as I have time, I sprinkle it around and I till it in. These here, you'll see bean plants or some grass clippings, pumpkin parts in there. That's been tilled in there. So that's just composting on its own, just sitting there. I do have another pile over here of grass clippings. That's going to get spread out. This is going to be for mulch. That's a different day, different story. But you can see I'm putting it in here on my asparagus plants. Sometimes I'll put heaps in a corner somewhere because I'll use it when I'm planting seeds. So that's how I do one of them. That's one of the ways I compost. Let's go to the next one. So here's my compost bucket. This is my yearly bucket. So I start in the spring. I put a layer of dirt, layer of compost, layer of dirt, so on and so forth. And what you'll see is when I roll this, you'll see eggshells. You might even see some night crawlers or worms in there, but banana peels, etc., etc. So you can see all that. Then what I do is I just take more compost, dump it. There's some pumpkin, banana, and paper, some non-wax style paper, non-coated, and it's biodegradable. And I will just roll that under, and then I'll throw some fresh dirt on this in a little while, and that will be watered. And then that will be my springtime planting. As I'm planting seeds for 2026, I will pull cupfuls out of that and put in furrows or put in the seed holes to give them a boost of nutrients while they're trying to grow. Last but not least, I've dug a trench because I have a couple pumpkin seeds from my pumpkins I've been making puree out of that are almost dry. So they're going to be my test pumpkins. Because I haven't put any compost in this part of the garden yet, this is my test garden, I will do this sometimes. So there is some potato peels, pepper parts from my green bell pepper, and eggshells. Then I'll just pull this native dirt back over. Okay. Then I'm going to let that sit there for a week or two. I will put water on that, let that decompose, and then I'll plant seeds there, and then they'll use that compost for nutrients to grow. So that'll be coming up, so stay tuned.